Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to talk about something that I think everyone should realize, especially if you have kids in school. Schools don't teach critical thinking. Here's why. If you're a parent of a child in school, or if you read articles about school curriculum or education, you very often will see that these schools and these curriculum companies are paying lip service to the critical thinking skills that they are teaching to children. But the more and more that these schools talk about teaching critical thinking skills to kids, the more we see that common sense and critical thinking are actually disappearing. And the reason for that is because all of that talk about critical thinking is just lip service. It isn't something that is really happening in school. And the reason for that is actually really simple, but I think it's something that a lot of people might not have thought about. You see, a population that knows how to think independently is hard to control, and that can make it outright dangerous. And whether you think that that applies to school or not, what you need to realize is that school is just another tentacle of the government. And if there's one thing that the government likes, I think that we're seeing that more and more and more nowadays, is they like control. So if schools would be teaching actual critical thinking skills, teaching students to actually think through things, to develop their own opinions, to do their own research, and to come up with their own conclusions, that wouldn't fare very well for the government, because you've got masses of children in the public school system, and that is going to be future adults who will be out there, who will be doing the voting, who will be the ones that are doing basically all of the menial tasks that the government itself won't be doing. So what they want to happen is they want to pour information into every student's head, and that's all that they want. They want to pour it in like a pitcher, and they want that information to sit there. They don't want to give kids the tools to think things through. They don't want to give kids the tools to weigh risks and benefits of things. They don't want to give kids the know-how to be able to tell when something is fraudulent or when it just doesn't make any sense. That's not going to help them. So what they do is they pour in what they want the students to think, what they want them to know, what they want them to feel. And, this has been going on for a really long time, but, we're just at a new point in time now where it's really reaching a critical point, and it's happening so much more than it was, or at least maybe it's just that we are noticing it more. But I'm kind of thinking that no, this is definitely something that is developing and is happening so much quicker. And so as I was thinking about this, I realized that, the education system has spent decades upon decades of indoctrinating students in an academic way of thinking. They have been indoctrinating students sometimes into accepting things, pretty much anything that the teacher tells them. And a lot of adults even have that mindset. If a teacher said it, then it must be true. But what they don't realize is that that teacher learned it from their teacher, who learned it from their teacher. And it is just this going down the rungs of a ladder type of thing. So no, that's not what we need to be instilling in our kids when it comes to education. And on top of that, we've had all of this time where some pretty ridiculous things have been taught to students in school, coming across as science, coming across as history, and they really don't make any sense at all once you take a step back and look at things as they really are. But the problem is that that's not what is happening. Students are being trained to be obedient. They're being trained to memorize things, and they are being trained to not question anything. So what this means is that, yeah, there are lots of academic things that can be presented to kids that make absolutely no sense, have no evidence at all whatsoever, yet students will absolutely trust them, they will absolutely accept them, and they will very often defend them when people do question these things that they're learning in school. So now that they've got us where they want us academically, because we're just at this point in time now where most people will pretty much believe whatever the government or a teacher tells them. That's just where we're at now. So now that they've got us academically where they want us, now they're starting to move in with teaching kids morality, or should I say amorality. And they're even teaching kids PC social justice things. So, now that academics are taken care of, we've already got all that indoctrination so ground in that even grandparents of the kids who are in school nowadays they're even deeply into this. So now we have all of these insane curriculums coming forth where you're noticing that academics don't really seem to be very important to schools anymore, do they? I mean, we've got Common Core going on, and article after article after article talks about how standardized test scores, which I put no weight on standardized tests, but I'm going by what these schools say because the schools seem to think that they're great. Standardized test scores of students have completely dropped since Common Core. And so what Common Core is doing is it's actually just teaching kids confusion. It's keeping kids confused. And again, it's not teaching those critical thinking skills that a lot of those Common Core materials say that they're teaching. They're not. They're confusing kids. So we've now moved beyond academics, because now we've got that insane math, if you can call that academics, being taught. And we now have these curriculums that are teaching kids just really morals that are completely contrary to what they've been brought up to believe. And these curriculums are basically advising teachers to just undermine what parents have to say. They want teachers to push back against parents who seem to object to the things that they're talking about. And it's not just that curriculum. Now I was watching a curriculum, I wish I could remember the name of it. I'll leave a link in the description box to a video about it though. There's another curriculum out there now that really wants to focus on racism in the US, and they want this to be presented to all of the students. But the more that you look into it, you realize that this curriculum is just going to create more division than anything, because it paints white students as automatic racists or racist by default, and then it paints non-white students as victims by default. And so what it is going to eventually do is it's going to have students butting heads with one another. It's going to have some students be feeling guilty for who they were born to be, and it's going to have other students being resentful for those students, and students who likely never did anything harmful against them in their entire lives. But I was talking about that control, and that's another thing. Creating division. When you have divided people, that makes it even easier to control people. That makes people you can manipulate them easier. And it actually makes it easier for you to be able, well, not for you, but for the government or whoever it is that's really in charge, to be able to tell what is going to happen next. And when people are together, those are the dangerous ones. People who are united, they're the ones who are going to one day realize that things aren't as they should be. And they're going to stand up and they're going to say enough is enough. So if you divide people, people become so accustomed to just bickering with one another that they're forgetting who the real enemy is. And it's not each other. So what does all of this produce? All of this indoctrination, all of this constant pouring in of information, but never teaching kids really how to think for themselves. It produces mindless obedient drones, and these people will follow the herd no matter what. And they will fight for the system that is enslaving them. And this is where you really come up with the term useful idiots. They're people who will fight and fight and fight for the point of view that has been brainwashed into them, and it's just because they don't know any other way. They have never actually thought their way out of it. And you see it happening more and more and more today. Like when you watch debates, what I'm seeing is that If you have a debate where you have one side, it is against something against the status quo, and then you have the other side where someone is arguing for the status quo. And what I've noticed is that the people who are arguing against the status quo, they have more developed arguments, they've done more research, they've put more thought into it, because they haven't had somebody feeding this information into them. This is something that they've done because they themselves are passionate about it and they looked into it. And then on the other hand, you have the people on the status quo side, and I say this all the time, it honestly feels like they're all just sitting there with a talking points paper sitting next to them, because they all just say the same things over and over and over again. They don't know how to come up with an actual argument. They only know how to repeat things that they've been told, and that's why you keep hearing the same thing again and again and again. So, you know, for these schools to say that they're teaching kids critical thinking, you know, some teachers, I'm not ever saying that this is on the level of the teacher, because this goes far over a teacher's head. This has nothing to do with teachers, and very often it has nothing to do with the principals. But they still are, they're being put in the position where they are doing this to kids, and most of them don't even realize that they're doing it. They're teaching out of the kindness of their heart. But, you know, as John Taylor Gatto said, the reason that he quit schooling was because he was not schooling. The reason that he quit teaching was because he was no longer willing to hurt children. And that is what is happening in the long run, is that these kids are being hurt. Both mentally and emotionally by all of the things that are going on, sometimes physically, but what we're mainly talking about are the mental and emotional things that are happening to kids in schools nowadays. So you just have to think, so what would happen if critical thinking were taught in a school? Well, if critical thinking were actually taught, people would start to think for themselves. They would start to question things. They would start to wonder if everything that they're being told that doesn't really seem to make any sense, if it's really true. And so what that would eventually cause would just be a mass of people who are waking up and realizing that things aren't always as we thought they were. And you know, you actually see that happening now. There has been a mass awakening that has been happening, and over so many different topics. You know, it's not just like it's one thing. There are so many different areas that people, it seems like they're just waking up out of their stupor. And you know, so when one group of people wakes up, they wake up some more people, and then that group of people, they wake up more, and then that group of people, they wake up other people, and it just has this domino effect. And this is something that the elite do not want to happen. This is why you have this gigantic push in the indoctrination, because they see these things happening, they're getting desperate, and they're going to go all in. So we really need to get to the point in time where we stop just talking with one another and asking ourselves, well, whatever happened to common sense? I wonder what happened to common sense. I think it's about time that we realize that we already know what happened to common sense. It has been completely ground out of our lives. And now I think it's time that we start wondering, how can we bring that common sense back? And I think that a lot of you know the answer to that question. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram, because YouTube disabled my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. Today, I want to give a shout out to my newest patron, Michelle. Thank you so much for supporting me. It is such an encouragement to me that I have this group of people who are willing to just have my back. And I just want to say thank you to all of you who are watching, and have a great day.